Tallahassee originally. I went to school right over here at Leon High School, right across near to you, and of course I went to FSU, is where I met Karl Zerbe.
So, what was your relationship with him?
I started out as an advertising design major, and that alone, you know. But then when I started, I wanted to, took the figure drawing courses and all those things, and design courses that are part of that program. Mm-hmm. But I always had painted, so I wanted to paint. I wanted to get some really good instruction from in painting. So I took the beginning painting course, where I was first I met him, and that just changed my outlook on just about everything. You know,
really?
I mean, it helped me in all my art. You know, later on when I did do advertising design type of work, it was good for that. But I always kept painting, and he was such a marvelous man. He was my favorite of all the professors I'd had at FSU, really. And the first time I met him, I was so surprised how unassuming the man was. You know, he really was such a sweet guy, really was. Tall, a little bit over like that a little bit, and still had the German accent pretty strong. We always liked the way he said green, sort of like Gween, but I couldn't do it the way he did. But he was, and he had time for everyone. You know, that was one thing that I really, I mean, even the ones that weren't too great, you know, that weren't really the most talented of the students, he still spent time with them.
So he was very patient.
Very patient. The studio was in Westcott. I don't know if you knew that. It was in the main building where you go right straight down College Avenue and go in, and it was on the second floor, and it was unair conditioned. In the I think it was unair conditioned in the studio, because we had the windows open almost all the time, because we didn't use mineral spirits, we used turpentine.
Oh gosh.
And you know, several students in there painting it. It could be pretty thick, and we all got assigned a tabaret and an easel, you know, and it was ours for the whole semester. You know, we stayed up all day long. We never had to take anything out, and so once I got hooked on that, I was there until they ran us out of Westcott at night. I mean, I was there all the time. It was just it was just my thing to be doing at that time, and my classmates, I don't know what became of all of them, but Diane Godin was an important person in the class for us, being a good painter, and Tom O'Connor was the like number 3 in the world on rings at gymnastics. You know, he was a gymnastics guy, but he was in there taking art and doing really good work. We had good instructors all around. We had Rudolph Yeager that taught advertising design courses mostly, and Carl Hilschuh, who taught, you've got a sculpture of his around here somewhere, more than one probably. Taught figure drawing and sculpture, and Ann Kern that taught fashion illustration. She and wrote books. She was really good, and so it was a good group of instructors. But my favorite was Zerbe, and one thing, he would take us into his studio sometimes, which, you know, to get into a really good painter's studio and see how they work and what they're doing and the progress they're making with things, that was really fun. Wow. And I remember going in there and looking at some of his work, and it was just stunning. It was like colors and combinations I had never seen before. You know, and he was working in oil at that time, and but earlier on he'd been in caustics, and he gave us a demonstration on encaustics, but he had given it up years before because he was allergic to it. But he stood, by and did that, even though he was allergic to the stuff, and showed us how to do it. And I really liked the work that he did after encaustics better myself. One thing I meant to mention to you, he was affiliated with a company in France, Beaucourt Artist Materials, and he got a sample of acrylic paints one time, and he just gave them to me. He said, "Bob, do a couple of paintings with this. Let's see what it looks like." And it was not your acrylics you have nowadays. It was oil-based acrylics. I don't know if you've ever heard of oil-based acrylics, but they were marvelous paints. I don't know why they don't do them anymore. I liked them better than the water-based. Way, way, way better. But I think it was a real loss, but to lose Zerbe, but got to lose him sooner or later, and he was one of about 5 or 6 in the art department that were all of German extraction.
Really?
Yes, they were whole shoe, out of Karl Zerbe, and let's see, there was one other. I think Jaeger, his family, they all were from Milwaukee, some of them were. And I think it was because one of the earlier art department heads was from Milwaukee. And I think he brought a lot of his staff with him when he came. And they were Florence Cava. I don't know what Florence's original was, but she came from there as well. So.
And were they competitive or very collaborative?
They were collaborative.
I hear you saying that he was your favorite professor.
Yeah.
Did everybody else feel that way, or was he controversial?
I think a lot of folks did.
Okay.
I think that a lot of folks felt that way about him. He, there was nothing scary about him or anything like that. Some of the others loved to intimidate you one way or the other, but he never did that. He never did that. He would. He could be brutal sometimes with his assessment of the work, because if we were doing a project where everyone was doing the same kind of a project, he would take us in the art history room where there was a chalkboard around with a ledge that you put your erasers on, and he would line them up from best to worst.
Really?
Yeah, right. And he could critique it all, and tell the ones who didn't get to the top they hope you see you up at the top, the next time. But that's the way he didn't mind doing that. But he had a good eye for things. I took a piece of tin, rusty tin, and I hung some stuff on it, and then I put a piece of newspaper there and cut it out to show me the edges of where I was going to stop painting. To fit on my canvas. And he said, "Oh, that's nice." He said, I like the newspaper thing. I said, I didn't intend to paint the newspaper. He said, "Oh yeah, you got to do that." So I had to paint this border all the way around that was newspaper. But he showed me a lot of things to do, how to get it done. But I was getting the rusty part. I was sitting there and diddling, like so many painters do. And he said, "Let me show you something." He said, "Spread some more of that newspaper down on the floors." And we put the painting on the floor, and he picked up one of my big brushes, and he took some burnt sienna and he scrubbed it around like that on the palette, and went, whew. He said, "Now you got it. That's the way you do it."
Oh, wow.
I never forgot that.
So he was very hands-on.
He was very hands-on.
Okay.
And we didn't know it back then, but nobody knew asbestos was so bad, and we would mix that into paint sometimes for texture effect.
Oh no!
And even though Zerbe was a chemistry man, I mean, he knew the chemistry of paint. His upbringing was in that area, and but he didn't know about the asbestos, I guess. But he did warn us about the lead white that we used. Lead white was still used back then, and but he just made sure we'd never had a brush in our mouth. You know, he'd give you a bit of his mind if he saw you walking around with a, you know, like a lot of artists do, you know, either this way or like a cigarette. And he didn't like to see us doing that.
So he incorporated his chemistry background in his teaching.
Oh, yes. I learned more about the chemistry of paint from him than anybody else I've ever been around. Yeah, and that's so important, I think, for painters to understand that the different minerals have different drying properties, they have different toxicity, and they have different transparencies and all those sorts of things. And he was, you know, he shared all that with us.
And what was the classroom environment like? Was everybody talking and joking and getting along?
Yeah,
or was
we
it quiet?
we talked. We talked. And you understood when somebody was into it and didn't want to be talking. I mean, that was a given. And we had the windows open, and we could talk out the windows to people on the sidewalk if we wanted to. But we didn't do that while we were in class with him. But you know, during the time when he was out and we were in there on our own time, we did that. And it was. And sometimes some of us would stop between classes, run in there, and work on our paintings for a little while, and then get back out and to the other classes. I can't remember another class that I did that for.
Oh, wow. Did he expect a lot from you, or was he pretty relaxed?
No, he was. He didn't expect a lot from us. He expected us to be self-motivated, and if we weren't, that was our fault. You know, if we didn't have the drive to create work, I don't think he wanted to whip us into doing it if we weren't going to do it on our own. You know, that was the and it was to find out that you could do it in his class, you felt pretty good about it. You know, if you felt like you were meeting his standards, you were pretty pleased.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did his style influence you at all? I know he
was
very
I know it did.
expressionistic.
Yeah, I know it. It did for me, and I think it did for a lot of people. You know, abstract expressionism was the vogue back in the '60s, and mine was early '60s, '59, '60, in there. And I think his influence is some of the other professors were influential too for me and for other students as well. In our class, he probably gave more time to Diane Godin while I was there because she was so good. That was what he was. He wasn't interested in whether you were male or female or whatever. We didn't have any black students back then, but he was interested in whether or not you were going to do the work. You know, if you were going to do the work and you had promise, then he was going to spend time with you. And just as a person, I think if I could have been a person like him, you know, that would have been that's why I saw him. You know, this is a man I would love to be like.
Did you maintain a relationship with him after
No,
school?
I didn't. The last time I saw him was here at LeMoyne. And I can't recall what the event was, but it was after I came. My wife and I had been to Africa and back, and we moved back to Tallahassee. And I came here and I saw Mr. Zerbe, and I shook his hand, and he winced, and it was I didn't know it. He had severe arthritis by that time. And I just hated it that I'd done that then. That's the last time I saw him.
Why do you think young people should be interested in Zerbe?
Oh, I think because such an internationally known artist came to Tallahassee, and you know, just lived in an unassuming home in Indian Head Acres, and didn't try to make a big splash in the community. he'd made a big enough splash already. He sent most of his works off to a couple of galleries in New York City and in Boston, I think. The Nordis Gallery was one of them. I remember others as well. And I just think that I'm glad to see y'all are doing the show right now that's recognizing him, because he didn't illuminate his light here in Tallahassee so much. He wasn't interested in doing that, and he was interested in going off on a trip every couple of years to the Antarctic or somewhere, or the Arctic, I can't remember, and or going off to some tropic place. And he loved to take his, I guess it was a 16mm camera with him, and it did oodles and oodles of films of his travels, and they were pretty good. I saw a couple of them. But he should be remembered for being just a fine artist that came to live in Tallahassee. He could have lived in a lot of other places. We're glad he came here. Oh, he got me on mulberry paper.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I've done a lot of my paintings. Not a lot, I think, but I've done a number of paintings where I glued mulberry paper to a board and painted on them. It makes a great, nice textural surface.